James Doty is the founding director of Stanford Center for Compassion and Altruism, as well as clinical professor in the Department of Neurosurgery. Is an inventor and philanthropist. Is the chairman of the Dalai Lama Foundation, on the board of a number of non-profit foundations, on the International Advisory Board of the Council for the Parliament of the World's Religions. And
especially for an atheist.
And he's the author of Mind Magic, his latest book. Okay, it's all yours. All yours.
How much time do I have?
20 minutes until 7:30.
What? I'll just be finishing my introduction.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And so I'm going to talk about my new book. How many of you either know anything about me or have read my first book? How many don't know why they're here? Okay. How many read the first book? Did I ask this already? Yeah. Okay, so not very many. So you may wonder why a neurosurgeon has any interest in founding a center based on compassion. I'm sure some of you have seen movies with neurosurgeons, and frequently they're not always the nicest, cuddly type of people. And the reason is, that I grew up in a slightly different environment, and it sort of imbued me with a interest in compassion. And basically I grew up in poverty. My mother was an invalid. She had had a stroke when I was a child, and my father was an alcoholic. We were on public assistance, and of course this isn't the best environment to succeed in life. And what intervened was I walked into a magic shop. So the title of my first book is called Into the Magic Shop, A Neurosurgeon's Quest to Discover the Mysteries of the Brain and the Secrets of the Heart. It ended up being a New York Times bestseller in 8 countries. I think it's in 32 languages. And how many of you know BTS, the Korean pop music band? They actually used it as the basis for their third album called Love Yourself Tear. And in that album is a song called Magic Shop. So obviously that book was very popular. And the reason it was popular was on many levels, it resonated with people's own experience in life, overcoming hardship and the struggles they've had. And so the book was really focused on this woman in the magic shop who, and this was before mindfulness and neuroplasticity were talked about, actually recognized my own challenges and sense of hopelessness and despair, and as a result, she taught me a mindfulness practice before mindfulness was really brought to the U.S. And clearly she must have been from some Eastern religion or had had some experiences in the East. So I walked into this magic shop, and lo and behold, this lady was there. She knew nothing about magic. She was the mother of the owner who was running an errand. But regardless, she was one of these people who I'm sure all of you have met, who have a radiant presence about them. They're non-judgmental, they accept you, they treat you with dignity, and she was one such person. So after we talked for about 20 minutes, she said, I really like you, and I'm here for another 6 weeks, and if you show up every day, I think I can teach you something that could really help you. And as you can appreciate, children who grow up in the environment I was describing, which fundamentally describes ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, don't succeed in life. And they either become drug addicts, alcoholics, or they hyper excel, but oftentimes that process doesn't make them kind or compassionate, it makes them ruthless. But regardless, this woman spent time with me, helped me understand my trauma, taught me a relaxation technique, a self-compassion technique, because so many people in the West are hypercritical of themselves, which as a result causes them to create fixed belief systems about what they can and cannot do. And so she made me understand that, and she taught me how to change the narrative from one to negativity to positivity. Once, and I won't say I mastered it, but once I understood this and was practicing it, the next thing she taught me was a visualization technique. And many of you may call that manifestation. So, long story short, I had no interest in writing a book, but a literary agent chased me down, and finally I agreed to write the book that I described to you. So, from that book, a lot of people wrote me notes about manifestation. What does that mean? And as a neuroscientist, neurosurgeon, I'm not interested in woo-woo or pseudoscience. I'm interested in how the brain works. So I delved into this to understand it because, in fact, it works. Unfortunately, like many things that have been known experientially, there is a narrative associated with it, such as the law of attraction, and a number of authors who promoted this idea of the universe cares about you. So I ended up writing this new book called Mind Magic, The Neuroscience of Manifestation and Why It Changes Everything. And I debunked all the woo-woo and really based it on science. So that's what I'm going to share for you for the next 14 minutes or so. Now, the first sentence of the book is, anybody have any idea? The first sentence of the book is, the universe doesn't give a fuck about you. Okay? And it doesn't. And that's not because there's somebody there, it's because there's nobody there, at least in my humble opinion. So the question is, why do you act the way you do? Is it possible to change your mindset and how you look at the world and look at yourself? And is there woo-woo involved? So the first thing is, there is no woo-woo involved, there's no pseudoscience here. So one of the first things, if you're going to change your mindset, how you see the world, and create a narrative that then defines you, there are certain things you need to do. Now, one of the first things people don't appreciate is that we're all manifesting already all the time, right? But compare yourself as an amateur to a professional athlete, and there's a big difference to how you may practice it versus somebody who understands it. And of course, when you understand it and practice it through understanding, it's much more efficient and more likely to happen. So, what people forget is who you are today is a result of your past, especially your childhood. And many of you may be familiar with attachment theory. Well, as we grow up, we don't appreciate that many of our behaviors as adults are dictated by our past. Well, if you have no understanding of that fact, then it's really hard to change. I'm sure you've met people who they'll be talking to and lamenting the fact that they're now on their third divorce and they married the same three men or women or whichever it is, right? It's because they have these imprinted patterns that make decisions for them regarding how they see themselves, how they interact with others, partners they pick, etc. So, if you're going to manifest, you have to understand and be aware of these factors that may cause you to be biased or not see how you are or how you react to situations. And of course, any of you meditators here know that one of the most important things to calm the mind is to have emotion control. Right? So, the first thing is understanding that. Now, the next part may seem a little strange, but I call it the love versus hate narrative. And what do I mean by that? Now, when people talk about manifesting in popular culture, it's usually, I want a Ferrari, I want a mansion, I want to meet the partner of my dreams, and if I put the energy out to the universe will find me worthy and give me all of that. And that is not true. Now, what is true, though, in popular culture is this concept of visualization or certain techniques to actually not talk to the gods, but to create patterns in your brain. And as you know, through repetition, you lay down new neural pathways or you strengthen old ones. But getting back to love and hate here, because I have 10 minutes left. So, one is you have to understand what you really want, and versus what you may actually need. Now, as I said, in many people's narrative, what they want is something that is self-focused, right? And for many of the people, they want that for external affirmation, for people to look at them and say, oh, they're successful. Wow, they must be great. They've got this beautiful partner. They live in this big mansion. So I tell you that that is from a fear narrative, and it represents hedonic happiness. Now, let me explain the connection here. Unfortunately, modern society, success is defined as what? Power, position, money. At least that's been in my limited experience. I don't know about you. And the problem with that is this desire is pushed by capitalist culture, and it leads to conspicuous consumption, comparison, and self-judgment, because you're always competing with somebody. And the reason you feel that drive is because you're insecure. When you're insecure, it activates your sympathetic nervous system, your flight, fight, or freeze response, and that is the fear narrative. You're not good enough. You don't have enough. Somebody is beating you. Okay? So, and that represents hedonic happiness in many ways, in the sense that many people chase these things for external affirmation and for comparison. But the problem is that form of happiness is very shallow and very short-lived, versus looking through the lens of compassion and external motivation to connect and care for others. And what does that do? When you do that, that actually stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, the system that actually your peripheral physiology, your brain physiology function at their best. And that is the love mode. And if you look at our evolution as a species, we have small litters, and our offspring need to be cared for 10, 15, sometimes apparently 30 or 40 years. But regardless, so when we care, when we look at another through the lens of love, this releases oxytocin and other neurotransmitters that actually activate or increase the metabolism in your reward and pleasure centers. So that's why we care. That's why we're motivated to care. That's why we feel good when we care. And caring for others gives you meaning and purpose. And I'm sure some of you have seen the work of Dan Buettner or Robert Waldinger, who oversees the 85-year-old Harvard study about longevity and happiness. It all has to really do with social connection. So, when you look through that lens, act with that as your motivator, you are much more likely to get rewarded, and I'll tell you why, through your manifestation techniques. And what you realize when you look through that lens is you don't need all the things that you were striving for, or having them you realize is completely unimportant. It's great to have things, but you don't need things. And if you don't use that to identify you, you are much happier. And listen, I drive a Porsche, and I like that. But if it's gone tomorrow, it doesn't change one iota of how I see myself. And I think that's how we need to be. I have 6 minutes left, so how am I getting the rest of this in? So, the first thing is, understand what you need, not just what you want. If it's what you need, what you're doing is leading a life of meaning and purpose, connecting with others. And it gets you not only your intention to manifest, but all the positive benefits of that connection. So the next thing is how you embed your intention into your subconscious. And this is that part of your brain that you have access to on some level, but it is not at a conscious level. So every minute or so, we have about 100 million bits of information coming through our sensory organs, and that's how we connect with the world, right? Well, on a conscious level, we can only process 5 to 6 million. Now, that probably, on some level, seems like not a lot, but it's not very much. The point is, 99.9% of the information coming into you from your sensory organs are associated with maintaining homeostasis of your body. Okay, but that 50 to 100 million, or 50 to 60, anyway, somewhere along there. It's in the book. Read the damn book. You have the ability to control that. So we know that when you're able to activate your cognitive brain networks, when you're able to embed this motivation or intention into your subconscious, then several things happen. And the way you do it is actually to use your sensory organs. First of all, you think about it. You write your goal or intention down. You read it silently. You read it aloud. You close your eyes and focus on that. And through those practices with repetition, that either lays down or strengthens neural pathways, which then embed this into your subconscious. Now, the part of your subconscious that is activated is your default mode network initially. Now, this is when mind wandering occurs. This is process is self-referential, and this is the place where you define who you are and what you are. Okay? So once you embed an intention into your default mode network, then that activates something called our, why do I always forget this stuff? Positive something network. It's fascinating. Anyway, it activates your positive task network. And the first part of that is by this repetition, by getting embedded in your default mode network, it becomes salient to the brain. And that's when the task positive network kicks in. Once it becomes salient, then this allows you to cognitively focus. And so it is on your mind. And this then connects with what's called our attention network. And I use the analogy, it's as if you put this file folder in a file into your subconscious. It activates the salience network, and then there's a bloodhound down there that smells the scent and decides he's going to find the answer or make something manifest. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. As a neurosurgeon, I see patients with a variety of conditions, but let's say I see a patient has a benign meningioma, which is a benign brain tumor. And I tell them that, and almost invariably go, I have never heard of that. That is me. Is this common? Now, it is common. It's about 6% of people. It usually doesn't cause a problem. But the point is, I'll see them a few months later, what will they say to me? The most amazing thing. I've run into 6 people who have meningiomas, right? Because what's happened, your attention has been diverted. This is how manifestation works. So once you activate the subconscious, that activates essentially your executive control network, which has experience and memories, and then puts the bloodhound loose to find the solution. So this is why this woman met so many people who have meningiomas. Or I'm sure you've seen let's say an orange car, and you go, I've never seen one of those cars in orange. Then the next week you see 5 or 6 of them. Again, this is how you manifest. You make your intention salient to the subconscious, and through doing that. But your cognitive brain networks function at their best when you're relaxed, when you're calm, when you're open, when you're generous. That involves activation of your parasympathetic nervous system. That is when your physiology works the best. So the best way to manifest is to create the environment of calmness, generosity, compassion, and thoughtfulness. And if you read the book, there's, I think, a 6-week program. It is 6 weeks, but where I discuss some of the techniques to maximize your ability to manifest. And at the end of the book, even though I said the universe doesn't give a fuck about you, we are all the universe. And that's how the book ends. Because we are able to control our minds, our thoughts, our reality, and hopefully make the world a better place. 7:30, thank you all.
Before we take questions, can you say a few words about the center? I don't know how you pronounce it. CCARE?
CCARE, sure.
Microphone.
I founded a center called the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. And this is from my own background. I understood the power of compassion, and I won't go through all the details. Read it in the first book. What is, I'm going to have to start over again. Anyway, I founded that center based on how my own life had influenced my view of the world. Once I started the center, and this is going to sound really strange and metaphysical, I was walking through the campus, I had a vision of the Dalai Lama. And it persisted. Now it's interesting because I had no interest in the Dalai Lama, because I'm an atheist. But this vision persisted. Long story short, I decided to invite the Dalai Lama to Stanford. And we had this first meeting. I met him. We had 15 minutes with him, but literally within 5 minutes, he and I became friends. Our conversation went on for an hour and a half. And at the end of that conversation, he actually made the largest donation he'd ever given to a non-Tibetan cause to help found the center. This led to he and I becoming friends, which led me to become the chairman of the Dalai Lama Foundation, and he and I have had a relationship. And it's also allowed me to meet some of the greatest spiritual and religious leaders in the world, including formerly Desmond Tutu, Thich Nhat Hanh, Sogyal Rinpoche, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, Amma, etc., etc. And so it's been a very blessing, much a blessing to me. The work we do is one fundamental research on compassion through a variety of techniques, MRI, blood our studies, or simply self-report studies. I also was a senior editor of something called the Handbook of Compassion Science. And we also have developed a variety of techniques and training programs to teach people how to be kinder to themselves and to others. And these are very popular. We teach them in 60 countries. So please check out the website. There's a lot there. And that's probably enough of me talking.
No, that's good. Yeah, so I'm sure there are questions.
There's one.
Yes. Can you use the microphone, please, so we can...
I was just curious, within the book, and I just ordered it, what areas do you think people have an agency to manifest? So you mentioned the things we can't manifest, like partner and things like that. What are the areas you think are manifestable, and what's an example of a study or methodology where getting more confidence in an area that was manifest?
Well, that's like a 2-word answer. First of all, you can manifest a partner. I'm just saying it's not based on woo-woo. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but you have to know what type of partner you want. But that could be a more challenging question. And what was it? And you asked me about studies that have been done related to
what is possible to manifest. How would you
to my knowledge, there are studies of manifesting and activating brain networks, and all the literature that I quote in my book. But on the manifestation itself, not directly. But again, all of these are related processes, which is mind training. And as you know, Tibetan monks or Wim Hof or others can actually control their body temperature, their heart rate, and a variety of other functions just through their mind, even though many people don't believe that. So it's quite powerful. A question, sir?
Yeah. I'm certainly aware of what you said about we're all manifesting all the time. And I got confused because I began to think I was only could manifest things that I could imagine. And what I was actually interested in is having things happen to me I couldn't imagine.
Well, that's not manifesting. That's either heaven on earth or hell. I don't know which, but
Well, it worked. It was absolutely amazing.
But if you haven't imagined it, it doesn't exist, so it can't be manifested.
I don't know how to explain it. That's
Well,
what
I am.
Okay, so it doesn't exist?
Well, no, I'm saying if there is no thought process that is based on your intention, which you just said there isn't, then there's nothing to manifest. Now, that's different between mind wandering or just having random thoughts, but that's not manifestation.
Or maybe it's the subconscious, as you were starting.
Well, everything is based on the
Right,
subconscious.
so, but that, in that way it is still me.
Okay.
Was there a question on that side?
I think this young lady had a question next to this old man here.
What do you think of the new brainwave, what's it called?
Neurofeedback.
Neurofeedback. That's becoming popular.
Yeah, there are techniques using electrical stimulation, or what we call evoked potentials, that can now be guided, and they can be used for a lot of different conditions: depression, anxiety, and just emotion regulation. So yeah, they work, but there's a reason they work, right? I mean, they activate parts of the brain. It's not because you were looking at the law of attraction.
Right.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You talked about the inner bloodhound and the salience network. Sue me if this is too personal, but in your life currently, what are you seeking out in every single moment?
Possibilities to promote compassion. That's very brief.
What the?
So I'm studying Havana. I can just shout it from here. I'm studying Havana syndrome, and there's a ton of woo, but there's a ton of real things, and it relates to quantum and all this fantastic stuff. Do you have any advice on how to separate woo from fact?
Well, I mean, I think there's fundamental scientific principles which you follow, and that often gives you quantifiable data, and that's probably the best you can do. You know, as many of us know, I mean, with people who self-report, you know, there's all sorts of biases that interfere, and again, subconsciously, people have agendas going on they may not be completely aware of. And you've seen several situations, as an example, in schools where everybody gets sick, right? It's sort of this wave that passes through, and your emotional state or how you feel about the world, it can be contagious.
Okay, a few weeks ago you spoke at the United Nations, right?
That is truth.
What did you tell the United Nations?
Actually, my purpose on being there related to mental health. So based on my work with compassion, self-compassion, and the reality that many of the people who come to us are suffering stress and anxiety, and actually it's a part of modern life, which is a whole nother lecture. But so the point is that I have been working actually on a project for the last 2.5 years, which is called HAPPI, HAPPI .ai. Okay, so no Y. No Y, just an I. And so what this does is, they're not therapists available for everyone, and we have this epidemic that's affecting all age groups, but certainly adolescents. So, while I say there's not enough therapists, which they're not, it's my energy from the universe. So what was I mumbling about?
Happy.
Not enough
Oh,
therapists.
yes. So the reality is there are not enough therapists, and if any of you have seen therapists, shockingly, they're not available after 5 o'clock on weekends because everybody's mental health goes on hold for a while. But anyway, when do you most get anxious and stressed? It's when you're no longer distracted, which is usually at night. The other thing is therapy is expensive, and most people don't need real therapy. What they need is an empathic listener who is non-judgmental. Okay, so 3.5 years ago when I came up with this idea, this technologies of AI and use of avatars was it was just early on. But what I've done is I've created an emotion assessment engine which uses facial analysis, which is the least accurate because you don't hold your face here all the time, voice analysis, and sentiment analysis. And so this is the first part of it, and it's always analyzing this. This is then connected to a proprietary conversational knowledge base that contains millions of pages of information on cognitive behavioral therapy, compassion-focused therapy, general principles of psychology. And then this is independent of an LLM or a large language model, but it sits on one. Then this is connected to a human-like avatar. So there are mental health apps where you type on them, but the problem is that you can make no emotional connection because you are typing out to the universe, if you will. Utilizing an avatar where you actually talk to the avatar, it's much more profound.